they're all being questioned from the left. And so the founding ideals of the country are being criticized. It's therefore not surprising that patriotism and love of one's country is in decline.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, the Wall Street Journal this week had a poll that showed that interest in patriotism is dropping among Americans. So you wrote a column about this. Why do you think we're seeing that trend?
It was an extraordinary poll. It found that only 38% of Americans say that patriotism is very important. That's not much more than half the number who thought it was very important only a generation ago in 1998 when the poll was first conducted. And one of the points that I made in the column that I wrote, which you refer to, is that America is constantly being attacked by the left as being a rather awful country these days. It is said falsely that it was founded on slavery. It is said that its ideals are humbug and hypocrisy. They were never real. There is, I think, a fairly insistent and relentless attack on what America stands for. And it's not surprising that under daily assault by the left, more and more Americans are self-doubting, doubting the merits of their own country. There is an avalanche of rhetoric against America by Americans, and that's bound to have an effect. And it's a very deleterious effect because, a country survives and thrives when the people of that country really believe in what their country is. America was founded on some wonderful ideas which served it extremely well over the course of nearly a quarter of a millennium. But now that those ideals, things which are enshrined in the Bill of Rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, they're all being questioned from the left. And so the founding ideals of the country are being criticized. It's therefore not surprising that patriotism and love of one's country is in decline.
That same poll also found that Americans are generally far less interested in having children.
Yep.
What do you see as driving that? And then what are some of the consequences maybe of people forgoing traditional family structures?
Well, it is to do with the fact that they are seeing less and less reason for to love their country or to wish to perpetuate their country. I think that Americans have traditionally felt that they won life's lottery by being born American. They were born into this marvelous country, which was the most powerful and the richest and most admired country in the world. And because there is such an assault on America from within, and on the very ideas of America, and it's sowing self-doubt, there's much less impetus for people to want to perpetuate that country. Again, the reproduction rate is to some extent a reflection of the confidence in the future that any population has. It's actually particularly concerning that the numbers are even lower amongst people under the age of 30 who are therefore arriving at or have arrived at an age where they would expect to become parents. They are even less than average concerned about having children. They're even less than the rest of the population. They think it's not very important.
Switching gears here, the Israeli government has been pursuing some controversial judicial reforms, and President Biden has now finally weighed in on those. First, sort of give us the lay of the land of what's happening there, and then what do you make of the timing of Biden's interjection?
Yeah, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been pursuing reforms of the judiciary in Israel for some months since he became Prime Minister. And many of these reforms would put in place a system that Americans would think was perfectly normal. The Supreme Court of Israel arrogated to itself certain powers of judicial review, which it does not have, or it did not have before the 1990s. And Israel has no written constitution, so it isn't as though the Supreme Court there was set up under a constitution to review legislation. The judiciary in Israel is a sort of left-wing establishment, and they appoint their own successors, essentially. They control who sits on the courts. And the courts in Israel are acting as an impediment to the democratically elected government. Now, there are some things which are part of the reforms which should be reconsidered, and we editorialized on this. That part of what Netanyahu wanted to do was to allow the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, to nix decisions by the Supreme Court on a piecemeal basis. And I don't think that that's a very good idea, and we don't think that that's a very good idea. But what's remarkable about President Biden's interjection just recently is that the occasion on which he chose to interject and to criticize Netanyahu was the moment at which Netanyahu said, okay, we're going to put a pause on this, and I invite input from opposition. It was rather extraordinary that at the very moment when Netanyahu was showing a willingness to compromise, that Biden took the opportunity to criticize him. And interestingly, Biden said there needs to be compromise, but at the same time he said that he hoped that Netanyahu would just drop the reforms. So he's not really looking for compromise. What Biden is doing on this occasion, I think improperly, is to suggest that actually the protesters and the left-wing judiciary are in the right, and Bibi Netanyahu is in the wrong. This is a very strange way to treat the head of the government of our closest ally in the Middle East. And very strikingly, of course, people are aware that the Democratic Party and the left have increasingly, over the course of the last several decades, in fact, drifted away from admiration for Israel and are much more inclined to take the side of Israel's enemies, not least Iran, with whom President Biden is trying to revive the appalling 2015 nuclear deal. So, President Biden seemed to me to interject both the timing and the content of what of his interjection were, I think, unfortunate and blundering rather in a characteristic way for this president.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.